So yeah, without much further ado, I'm going to take us to our first speaker. Aisha, if you could share the screen on Spoo. Our first speaker today is Spuzi Kode, who is the founding president of Abakhali Bazmjondolo movement in South Africa. Prior to this, he was the chairperson of the Kennedy Road Development Committee before becoming its president. Everyone should be able to see that now. He was born and raised in a small town called Escort by a single mother who worked as a domestic worker. He strongly campaigned for the right to housing in the United States national tour under the theme, "Housing is a human right." His calling includes safe and dignified housing for all in our cities. Under his leadership, the movement has won a historic constitutional court case victory on what was an attack on the poor and popular democracy. This victory was seen by many South Africans as a victory for all the impoverished and marginalized in South Africa. So I will hand over now to Sbu, and I think we can stop screen share now. We'll paste also the translations of these in the chat, and I'll hand over to Sbu to tell us about his journey in defense of home and to start us off. Thank you, Sbu.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Zara, for that short introduction. May I first of all thank Comrades 1000 Currents and all organizers of this session, and acknowledge my fellow panelists that are here with us today. Dignity is at the center of the politic of our movement. We insist that the recognition of the full and equal dignity of every human being is non-negotiable. We work to build a movement in which dignity of the oppressed is respected and communities in which dignity of the oppressed is respected. We also strive to force the rest of the society to respect dignity of the oppressed people. People often describe our movement as a home, a place where they belong and feel respected. That's what Abakhali is often described. I am very happy today that we will be discussing this important question of a home. Dignity has many different aspects. The right of every human being to have a safe and a decent home is an important part of what we mean when we say that we are struggling for our dignity as human beings to be recognized. In fact, our main slogan is land, housing, and dignity. Hence, my topic tonight is about the politics of dignity. The issue of the home is an urgent and a painful one for us. Many of our ancestors were forced off their land by colonial terror. The apartheid system continually destroyed Black people's home in the cities with the aim of forcing Black people to township outside the cities or to rural homelands. People resisted the attacks bravely, with women often leading, but the state was able to use violence force to evict millions of people from their homes. Many of us grew up with mothers who were living in other people's home while worked as a domestic workers. Many of us had fathers who were away from their family home working in the mines. In 1995, the African National Congress here in South Africa adopted the Freedom Charter. After collecting the demands from the people across the country, it was a vision for a life in a liberated South Africa. The Freedom Charter promised that after apartheid, all people shall have the right to live where they choose, to be decently housed, and to bring up their families in comfort and security. Unused housing spaces to be made available to the people. Rent and prices shall be lowered, food plentifully, and no one shall go hungry. That was the promise of our famous document known as the Freedom Charter. In the 1970s and 1980s, people began to occupy land in the cities or near the cities. Huge stragglers had to be forced to occupy and keep this land. Again, women were often in the forefront of these struggles. After the apartheid, the ANC promised that there would be decent housing for all, but the houses that they built were much, much more smaller than the houses built under apartheid. Were very badly built, were usually much further out of the cities than the apartheid townships. Shack settlements, or rather the informal settlement, or slums, which had started as land occupation, were attacked by the state. Some people were left homeless and others were forced to what people called human dumping grounds, far out of the cities to live in houses that people called dog kennels. Many people were evicted or forcibly removed at a gunpoint. Our rulers changed, but the way that the government treated poor Black people did not change. We continued to face violence, the destruction of our homes and forced removals. This was a shock to us. It was not something that we were expecting. Now we know very well that oppressors come in different colors and speak all languages. Today, there are millions of people living in shacks than under apartheid. People continue to live in squalors with no refuse removal, no drain, no road access, no paths, no toilets, no electricity, and not enough water for everyone. There are regular fires and floods. Lives are lost. They are not conditions, these conditions that are fit for human, they are not conditions that are fit for human beings. In fact, people often say that they are treated like animals and not human beings. The government is now building some houses where people live, which is much better than forcing them, often at a gunpoint, to the human dumping grounds. But the system is completely corrupted. Housing budgets are used to make political connected people very rich, and local councillors only allocate houses to their supporters, to the people that can pay bribes. Others are left homeless when development comes. Development is often experienced as violent and dispossession. People who have organized to improve the conditions in shack settlements have been beaten, tortured, arrested, jailed, and murdered. When the land occupation are organized, it is not unusual for them to be violently attacked by the state 20 or 30 times. These attacks are illegal and the live ammunition are often used. Our communities is continually vandalized and destroyed. It is taken as a crime for us to organize ourselves, think for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. It is not just the state that treats the self-organization of the oppressed as criminal. Some NGOs and academia have done the same. These evictions that we face are not aimed at gentrifying our communities. They are aimed at destroying our communities. Sometimes the land occupation will be replaced with something like a shopping mall, and everyone can see that capitalism is driving this violence against us. But sometimes the African National Congress, which is the ruling party here, will destroy our occupations with the aim of bringing in their own people so that local councillors can charge rent and make sure that they have control over their wards. Sometimes land will be left empty after an eviction. Sometimes evictions do not happen because there are other plans for the land, but because the African National Congress, the state want to crush our autonomy and any challenges to its authority. We are still struggling for the right to have safe and decent homes. Before you can have a home, you must have land. This is why our struggle is a struggle for land, for housing in our cities, before it is a struggle for houses. In fact, most of our members would rather build their own homes than have the government build them because they do not trust the government. We identify and occupy well-located and unused land. This is urban planning from below. It is a land reform from below. No one is allowed to charge rent in our land occupation. And any occupation affiliated to our movement must be run on a democratic basis. We have built halls, we have built crashes, roads, paths, youth centers, political schools, and more on our land occupations. We have installed our own water and electricity connections. We are now also seriously working to build collectively organized and run urban farms. We are establishing what some people call communes or self-managed communities. Women are often in the forefront of these struggles, and many of our leaders are women. Without the courage of women and their commitment to build and defend homes, our movement will not exist and our families are broken. This is why building women's power in the struggle is one of the most important commitments.
Constitue un des engagements les plus importants. Nous avons, ce sont les femmes qui prennent le devant. Et il y a eu beaucoup de
our movement. Thousands of people live on this occupation, but the price for land has often been paid in blood. It is clear that we are not counted as human beings by the ruling party, by the states, the elites, and some NGOs in our society. Our demands for a home of dignity is taken as criminal. An important part of building a large movement and keeping it growing through repression is to make sure that the members control the movement and that the leaders are mandated by the members. In a meeting, everyone must be encouraged to speak, and the role of the leaders must be to ensure that everyone's voice is heard and that there is carefully collective process to reach decisions. That process must be respected. That process must respect everyone's dignity. The leader's role is to ensure a democratic and a respectful process and not to decide for others. A movement that gives up its autonomy to political parties or an NGO will quickly collapse. The members of a movement must know that it is their movement. It is also important that in a movement, people care for each other. A movement is not just a political tool. It also needs to be a family and a community. Something else that is very important is to always encourage and train new leaders. The more good leaders that a movement has, the stronger it is. We call on all of this as a living politic, which is a politic that is organized and owned by the oppressed and which speaks directly to their conditions and their lives. We have been struggling for more than 15 years. We have survived hundreds of evictions and repeated violence from the state and from the ruling party. We have lost 18 comrades to murder by the police and anti-land invasion units or the assassins hired by the local politicians. But the African National Congress is not only our enemy. We were made poor by the system of racial capitalism. Poverty will not be abolished until the systems of racial capitalism is abolished. No organization can do this on its own, and no country can do this on its own, which is why we work to build respectfully solidarity with other progressive organizations in South Africa and across the world. We will not win a secure right to land and thereby to housing and thereby to homes without building the power of the oppressed from below. No small organization can substitute itself for the organized power of the oppressed. We will not be able to win the right to participate in all decision making. I am now rounding off. We will not be able to win the right to participate in all decision making that affects us without building our own power from below. We are committed to radical democracy, democracy where people live, work, study, and not just to election every few years. We organize with dignity for the dignity. We struggle from the homes that we have built on occupied land for society in which everyone has a safe and a decent home. I just want to stop there and say thank you very much. Home for us is our life and it is our death. So I so wish that everyone could have a decent home that they can hope that they can have comfort and decent stay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sbu. Yeah, feel free to share your reactions if you're able. That was brilliant, and I feel like there's so much in there that really shows me how much the work threads together across the continent and the diaspora, from the radical democracy, the making sure the movement knows that the movement is theirs, and that member-led kind of approach and strategy. And it just, yeah, a real solid reminder of why the grassroots is so crucial, so key. And thank you for all of the work. Just a reminder I actually forgot to say this in the beginning, and I apologize. The Q&A box is open, so you can put your questions there for the chat later. If anyone has anything they want to add now, we'll go through it all later. And just to be clear, you can put into the Q&A box into whichever language you're listening into, and then we'll translate that on our side. So I will give, as we're introducing Amina, maybe people might have a chance to make any notes in the questions and answers or just for themselves. So Amina Gachinga, a power and a force unto herself. Amina is a musician, a speaker, and community organizer. She became disillusioned with the elitist environment of Parliament as a teenager and turned to grassroots activism in Newham in East London, which is in the UK, where she's always lived. Wanting to demonstrate a radical approach to how party politics could be done differently, she stood as the Greater London Assembly, which is the local London government's candidate for a grassroots organisation called Take Back the City in 2016 during London's mayoral and assembly elections. Since early 2018, she has worked as an organiser with the London Renters Union, organising with local tenants in her hometown of Newham to harness their collective power. Amina combined her love of music and her dedication to social justice in founding Nawi Collective, which is an all-Black women and non-binary femmes choir in 2017. So I pass over to you, my dear and beloved Amina.
Thank you, Sarah. So Sbu, thank you so much. That was so powerful to listen to. I'm like, I don't know if I can speak after that. Do you know what I mean? I'm all nervous now. I'm all nervous. But yeah, so much of what you said really resonates probably with what I'm going to speak about today. And I'm really excited to hear from you, Sophia, as well. So much to learn. So I'm freestyling a little bit, bear with me as I go. So yeah, my name is Amina Gachinga, and I thought I'd just explain my heritage. Sometimes it's complicated. As Sarah said, I've lived in Newham, East London all my life, and I am a Kenyan Kikuyu, but I'm also Chinese, Singaporean as well. So I've got that mix there. And yeah, as we're speaking of home, like Newham has always felt like home to me. We have a population here of 365,000 people, and over 40% of the population have been born outside of the UK, you know, including my parents, you know. So I'm first generation English, or whatever you want to call me. And in my area, I see plenty of like opportunity to build a grassroots movement of working class African and Asian actually renters to lead the fight against gentrification and also ultimately landlordism, because that, you know, that underpins, you know, with capitalism, all of the ills that we're facing in my area and across the world, I guess. So my job is to support local renters to organize and to stand up to landlords and to do mass campaigning to transform the housing system so that it works for people and not for profit. So I thought I'd just explain a few of the issues. I can't do all of them because there's just not enough time, but some of the issues that I'm really seeing come up time and time again with our members in the union. And just to say, our membership has coming up to 5,000 members, and it's really increased during the pandemic. We see a lot of people that are struggling to pay rent and are therefore making the choice between buying food or paying their rent and keep staying in their home at the moment. And that's 800,000 renters in the country that can't afford their rent. Yeah, so that's like one of the main issues that we have right now. But in my area has the most people living in temporary accommodation in the whole country. And so before COVID, this was 14,500 people, and it must now be more because we're seeing a lot of people being illegally evicted from their homes, although there's an eviction ban technically, and like bailiffs can't evict people, but landlords are using violent means to evict their tenants, and many of these tenants will be Black, and many of these tenants are undocumented also. We have a very depleted public housing stock. So what we see is like a lot of our council housing, a lot of our public housing has been bought up under Margaret Thatcher, boo, Margaret Thatcher's right to buy legislation, which she brought in, and it enabled council tenants to buy their properties, but that stock wasn't replaced. So we don't have much public housing at all. So there's 28,000 people on the public housing list, waiting list, just in my area alone, you know, and I'm just in one borough in London. So what this does is it pushes people into the private rented sector, which is barely regulated. People live in very overcrowded, unsafe, unhealthy conditions, and are very worried to complain about the repair jobs that need doing, because although it says in law that a landlord is responsible for doing the repairs, especially around the structure, the water, the main structure of the building, they can also evict you without any reason. And the tenancies are very precarious, right? So what it means is that people don't want to complain about the state of their housing, and often can't afford to do the repairs themselves. And why should they? Why should they have to do the repairs themselves, you know? So this is a huge issue, and it impacts Black people a lot, because obviously you're more likely to have a racist landlord if you're Black as well, and you're more likely to be in precarious work as well. So you don't have much choice of like what housing you can access. And just to go into the hostile environment as well. So we have a system whereby landlords are essentially borders agents. So when you take on a tenant as a landlord, you have to check their passport. And if you haven't done so, and you are found to be, and you are found to be housing someone who is undocumented, you will face a fine as a landlord. I haven't timed myself very well at all, and I have to come to the end of the talk. But basically, like what we're doing at the moment as a movement and as a union is taking collective action against landlords who steal deposits and don't do the repairs on their homes. And the ways we do that is by physically going outside and letting agents, and like having a banner, and like getting landlords and estate agents to agree to negotiating with their tenants. And we've managed to win repairs. We've managed to also win better housing conditions in council homes with our members. We've managed to resist eviction, you know, like especially during this time, we're training members to be able to physically resist eviction and keep people inside their homes during COVID. And we're actively campaigning against the government so that they will cancel rent debt and that they will ban all evictions, because they originally said that nobody will lose their home as a result of the coronavirus, but they obviously don't give a toss, right? They're a right-wing government. Most of them are landlords. So anyway, so this is how we're doing it. And ultimately, Black people need to be at the forefront. And this is where I come in. Black people need to be at the forefront of this fight. And it's not for aesthetic reasons. It's not because it looks good. You know, when you're in a majority white country, it's really hard because a lot of white people you organize with say, oh, we need more Black people. But why? We need it because we need it for our collective liberation. Because when Black people have land and housing, sorry guys, when Black people have land and housing, when poor Black people have land and housing, that's when we will all be liberated. Yeah. So that's why we need that leadership. And that, yeah, that's sort of why I'm here. Yes. I'm sorry, Sarah, I tried.
It was worth it. That was beautiful.
How can you keep it to 7 minutes? It's impossible.
I know, it's massive. It's a massive topic. And I think it's also like, as you're both speaking, I'm reminded of like the micro and the macro. And on the one hand, it's like this very technical stuff that you have to do as organizers, looking into the kind of structures of the building, the exact regulations. And also, you know, moving into kind of where Sophia steps in, the kind of the bigger picture of like this absurdity of landlordism. And why is it that we're even in this, why do you even have this land from me in the first place? And I think that's, yeah, I think that's really what you evoked for me anyway, listening to that is like, why did they even, why, no. So with that inarticulate summary, I'm gonna move us to Sophia. And I'm just gonna say a little bit about Sophia before we begin. So Sofia Garzón Valencia is a Black woman, mother, neighbor, and Pan-Africanist. She's a member of the El Proceso de Comunidades Negras, which is the process of Black communities, and the Movilización de Mujeres Negras por el Cuidado de la Vida y los Territorios Ancestrales, which is the mobilization of Black women for the care of life and ancestral territories. She's also a co-founder of the Colombian Association of Black Economists, Asomano Cambiada. Her work centers on collective and women's rights and their relationship with the policies that mediate them. It investigates mechanisms that support racial and supremacist projects in their installation, their updating, and their de-installation. This is part of the articulation and expression of the different facets of Afro-Colombian life and the popular social movement. So I will hand over now to Sophia to take us home. That was
Hola a todas, a todos.
Hello to everyone. Very grateful. Can you hear me well? Can you hear me? I'm very grateful to the journey of our ancestors that bring us here. Gratitude to Zara for bringing us together. And to the Thousand Currents team, because it's beautiful to listen to Spoon and to listen to Amina and to know that as an African diaspora and as African descendants, we are fighting. And so it's exciting to hear that we are working together. I'm excited to hear that we don't have our arms crossed, that there are unions of workers, black and brown. This makes me very happy. It inspires me. And I want to say thank you to the team that is doing the interpretation. I am learning how to manage the language in general, so you'll have to excuse me. And I want to give thank you to Amy, to Christopher, to Edward, to Alec, to Gregory. There's two Gregorys listening, a Julieta, Caterina, Elena, Linde, a Paulette, a Ruth, a Sunja, a Tracy, that are using their time to think about the diaspora, to think about new ways to articulate our resistance. And with that resistance, to see what world it is that we're birthing. That's what the Black women would say in Colombia. And so that question that Sarah is asking is a question that I've asked myself several times, because I'm a Black woman uh, uh, born in Bogota, in the capital of Colombia, that has about 46 million inhabitants. And approximately 12% of people are Afro descendants. So about 4 to 5 million of us live here that are inheritors of this of the slavery here in Colombia. And in 2014 is the story that I want to tell you, to answer the why that Sarah gave us. So 22 Black women um, decided as part of a community council, Jolombo, that is the in Buenos Aires. We decided to walk. We walked 430 kilometers, and it took us about a month. And we left from Jolombo to Bogota to say that we are demanding the right that our daughters and our sons, and that all of us have the right to have free territories, free from mining. That we say that unconstitutional mining is all that the state authorizes without our consent. And so then in our territory, in that territory, there's Dogumis, Ararak, Congo, and there in our last names, you can see directly the imprint of Africanness. And so we came there, and that community council that was established in 1636, and the state has said no, that we are not Black people, and so they don't consult us. When we are born here in Colombia, Black people, to us, when our belly button falls out, that belly button that falls out after they cut it, they bury it. And that we call burying the belly button. And so to boys and girls that are born, there are various elements that there are depending on the properties that you want to have, like the force or the sagacity, and then you create some sort of grease or some element of nature, you cure the belly button. And so after we cut it, that connection with our progenitor is buried again. And so it's as if we go from the body of our mother to the body of our larger mother, which is this planet, this beautiful blue planet that we have.
Cuando empiezan a
And
desplazarnos,
so when they begin to displace us, to change our practices that go against our autonomy, when other folks with another sense of the world come to want to come and mine our gold, or harvest the cane, or introduce monocultures, is that these communities that we have a tradition of life in things and near the rivers for over 200 years, they there come these interests of folks that have titles, that the colony or the colonists and the slavers inherited, versus the position or the possession, the tradition that we have of having conserved these territories in an organic dynamic is more than sacred, is organic. I care for the water, the plants, the home, because it cares for me. So it's organic more than sacred. It's organic. And so when we grow in this context, in this community context, collective community context, we know that it's not just people. We know that community is river, mountains, it's those places where we've planted. And so I forgot to locate this timer, but that's what we don't use. And that's why we go to walk. And while we walk, we began to win. Began to win folks who joined our march. Some from Santander, from Quilichao, Buenaventura, from Cali. And so we went and we would stop in the plazas and say, hey, they are poisoning the rivers. They are removing us from our lands because they're not consulting with us. And so people would stop and listen. People would stop and listen. And so we grew this mobilization until we got to Bogota, and we were about 300 people. People who left everything and got to Bogota to speak with the government, who we had already spoken to many times, to speak with the United Nations, which we had already spoken to many times, with the Constitutional Court, with the United Nations, which we had already spoken with many times. And so we saw that the people that we were finding were more willing to listen and to support than those people that were in those places, and that say that their function is that all of us have dignified lives. And so that's why we echo these words of Amina and Asbu. And so when we personally grow up in the city and we forget that our belly buttons are buried and that we can have properties of nature in our bodies, that is the politic of gentrification. That is the politics of metropolitanism, of displacement, to empty our bodies, to empty our lives, to empty our essences, so that then they have to tell us how we can be. And so that's how they tell us to be. This is the place where you have to be. They take our time. They teach us to talk about productivity. They discipline us through by ways of a career, and when we don't have it, then by way of work, and then we forget that we can dream and invent our world, right? And so when Asbu Yamina say we're training people so that they can resist evictions, we are empowering women to create autonomous communities. We are reclaiming our right to invent our present and our future, and for that we need a place. We need a place, right? I can't exert myself as a Black person if I don't have a place, right? And so my home, in which I should feel safe, and which is what we are denying, what capitalism is denying, what patriarchy is denying, what racism is denying so many people, is feeling in yourself, in ourselves. And so I believe that that was the experience that I wanted to share with y'all, because we know that feeling part of the planet and having a model that is making us forget, but we are so stubborn. We are the daughters of the stubborn men and women that never gave up, and that's why we're here with each other and discussing, yes, how are we going to do this? How are we going to recover our essence for everyone? Thank you.
Thank you. I kind of, I feel like I have chills, goosebumps listening to that, and just thinking about the power of that walk, of that unity, of that stretch. Sadly, we have just 8 minutes left together, and it's been really beautiful just having this space, having everyone connect, having this conversation that stretches through kind of many continents and many peoples, whilst also being kind of brought together by the unitedness of our peoples. There's one question in the chat box, which is around Pan-Africanism and what that means. And I think for me, this brings a bigger question around Pan-Africanism being a kind of a way of thinking about internationalism in a way. And I wonder if just in the last 7 minutes, if we can each speaker can maybe give a 1 or 2 minute closing, just speaking to what it is for you as Africans on the continent and in the diaspora, some identifying as Pan-Africanists, to work in these very local contexts, but always with this consciousness that this is a global struggle. I think that's, yeah, for me particularly inspiring, and obviously for some of our attendees as well. So yes, does any speaker want to open up, just to thinking about what does it mean to work locally, and
Yo
also
voy a hacerlo
embody
muy
that.
breve.
Bye.
En términos...
Yes, I'll be brief.
Son dos preguntas entonces.
Well, there's 2 questions then.
Entonces, en respuesta a lo del panafricanismo.
So in response to Pan-Africanism and what I practice, because more than understanding, it's a practice. It is an irrevocable decision to love Black people wherever they are in the world. And so a compa shared that with me that's named Mateusa, who is a trans Black woman who lives in Sao Paulo, in the favelas in Sao Paulo. It's that. You don't need more definition than that. It is the unrestricted will to love Black people wherever they are. That is the way that I understand and practice Pan-Africanism.
Sorry, I thought I was on mute. Excuse me. Apologies for that. I was just, that was beautiful. Sorry if I interrupted you, Sophia, if you wanted to add anything. Okay. Whew. Thank you. Amina or Spoo? Spoo, you're on mute.
Yes, if I may come in. For me, my closing remarks would really, I want to appeal and challenge comrades wherever they are, that international solidarity is very important. It is high time that we link our struggles. And in order to link our struggles, we really need to build a strong foundation so that we have solidarity between and within different struggling communities across the world. So the message is, how do we come together in this space at a global level, simply because capitalism has no face, has no boundary. It is everywhere, and therefore we need to build the power of the working class, the power of the impoverished from below. So I want to call upon my fellow panelists, comrades everywhere around the world, that it is high time that we join our struggles in order to build a powerful force that will confront all forms of injustices and exploitations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Spoo. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really feeling the kind of pull together, that call to arms. Amina, take us home.
I can't believe that this is ending now. Like, I'm not ready, basically. I'm not ready. I'm not ready for this conversation to end. What Sophia said about, yeah, the practice of just, not practice, but yeah, just being, the ability to like love Black people wherever they are across the globe. And you know what it's like when you see Black people and you're just like, it's all love. That is Pan-Africanism. And I think, you know, Zara, when you talk about sort of organizing at a local context, I feel like my head is buried like very much in the local context, but I've got all people from all parts of the globe around me speaking every language. I think that my community might be the most multicultural place in the world. Do you know what I mean? So I feel blessed for that. But I also feel like, as someone who has grown up in a city like London, with the privilege that that holds, you know, and also the, you know, there's that sort of UK centric vibe. It's like there's so many stories that are missing. There's so much that I've learned today from Sabu and Sophia that I'm going to bring back, and I'm going to be telling these stories. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's what makes you feel fearless. That's Pan-Africanism as well, isn't it? Feeling fearless and being courageous and like passing those stories on. From my heritage, it's always been oral tradition, yeah? So you always speak the stories, and we need to speak those stories. We're good storytellers as Africans, and we need to continue. We need to do that more and more and more and more. And lastly, yeah, I guess this relates also to, like, when I think about landlordism and like defending home, I think about the fact that, you know, my ancestors were were made to pay rent, yeah. But the first, like my not so far back in the generations of my family, we were made to pay rent, but people don't know that rent wasn't a thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, rent didn't exist before the colonizers came and put that on our ancestors and on us now. So I feel like we have the answers in our ancestry also, and we need to look ahead, but we look back because we had those answers also, and that's really, really important for me when I'm thinking about working with Black people and drawing out those deeper things that we need to return to. Yeah, but it's been beautiful, folks.
Yes, hasn't it? So we are exactly on 7 o'clock. So I want to liberate everyone, as we said we would, on time. And I just cannot extend a deep enough gratitude to all of the incredible speakers and interpreters and panelists and participants that are on this call, that are listening in, that are resonating and that are feeling this, that are doing this work, and that are an inspiration to all of us as Africans, wherever we are, to know that we're in this struggle together and that we're moving forward. We're just going to paste a couple of links in the chat so you can continue to follow us, get to know us. Our next event will be on the 17th of February at 4 p.m. WEST, which is UTC +1. And yeah, so follow us, follow the journey, find out more, register for the next event. Immense thank yous and endless gratitude to our speakers today and their incredible work. And it was beautiful sharing this space with you. So thank you all. I'm just going to open up the chat in case anyone wants to say anything to the panelists before we leave.